"Daddy, can I eat with you?" The street girl's question breaks the millionaire heart. The hum of traffic, the occasional shout from a street vendor, and the soft footsteps of people walking hurriedly on the sidewalks filled the air. Streetlights flickered gently as the night slowly wrapped its arms around the tall buildings. Among all this movement, a tall, sharply dressed man stepped out of his sleek black car, adjusting the cuff of his suit with a practiced motion. His shoes clicked softly against the polished sidewalk, announcing his presence to the few passers-by who noticed him. This man was wealthy beyond imagination. A millionaire who had earned his fortune through shrewd business deals and careful investments. He was a figure of admiration for some and envy for others. But despite the grandeur surrounding him, he carried a quiet loneliness. His life, although full of luxury, had very little warmth in it. He walked slowly toward a high-end restaurant, a place where the lights inside shimmered like gold, reflecting off crystal glasses and polished marble floors. The aroma of freshly cooked food, spices, and baked bread floated through the air, drifting briefly toward the sidewalk. He paused near the entrance, letting his eyes survey the street. Most of the people who passed him barely noticed him. They were wrapped in their own lives, their own struggles, and their own dreams. Yet, as his gaze moved toward the corner of the street, it landed on a small figure huddled beside a wall. It was a young girl, no older than 10 or 11, wearing clothes that were far too thin for the chilly evening. Her hair, long and tangled, hung over her shoulders, and her eyes, wide and alert, scanned the passers-by as if searching for something she might never find. She clutched a small, worn-out bag close to her chest, one that looked as though it had been stitched together and repaired many times over. Her shoes were old, with holes that let in the cold, but she barely seemed to notice. Hunger, fatigue, and the sharp edge of city life had taught her to focus on survival rather than comfort. The girl's eyes locked on the man, not with fear, but with curiosity. She had watched him from the shadows as he stepped out of his car, his every movement smooth and deliberate. She had seen the way people around him gave him space, respecting, or perhaps fearing, his presence. And then, in a quiet voice, almost swallowed by the city's noise, she asked something that no one had ever dared to ask him before. "Daddy, can I eat with you?" The words were small, fragile, almost like a whisper carried on the wind, but they hit the man like a sudden storm. He froze for a moment, unsure if he had heard correctly. "Daddy," he repeated silently in his mind, a word he hadn't heard in years. It was a word from a life he had left behind, from memories buried deep beneath the weight of his success. The girl, standing there with her hopeful eyes, had unknowingly stirred something long forgotten, something tender and vulnerable. For a brief moment, the street seemed to disappear. The distant sounds of traffic faded into a dull background hum, and the cold that had brushed against his coat felt irrelevant. He looked at the girl again, studying her face. There was no pretension, no act, no request born out of expectation or entitlement. It was pure honesty, the raw kind that only children possess. She was hungry, yes, but more than that, she was seeking connection, a small piece of warmth in a world that had given her very little. The man shifted uncomfortably. He had faced challenges in business, negotiated deals worth millions, and handled situations where failure could mean ruin. Yet this moment, this small question from a street girl, left him completely unprepared. He felt a lump rise in his throat and a tightness in his chest. People often told him he was cold, unapproachable, even ruthless when it came to business. And yet here was a child, treating him not as a powerful man or a figure of wealth, but simply as a human being, someone who might be able to offer a little kindness. He opened his mouth to speak, but words failed him. What could he say? That he had never had children of his own, that he had no idea how to respond to such innocence, that his life, filled with material wealth, had left him empty in ways money could never fix. He felt a strange mix of guilt and admiration for her courage. Many adults would have walked past, hurried along their path without a second thought. But this little girl had stopped him. She had pierced the walls he had built around himself. The girl shifted slightly, hugging her bag closer. She did not appear afraid or disappointed. In her eyes there was trust, a quiet hope that he would understand. She did not demand anything, but her words carried a weight far greater than any order or command. "Daddy, can I eat with you?" she repeated, a little louder this time, her voice trembling with the effort of standing alone in the cold. The man's mind raced. He thought about his life, the empty dinners in his high-rise apartment, the board meetings that replaced family gatherings, the vacations that were lonely despite their luxury. He realized that he had spent so much time building walls around himself that he had almost forgotten what it meant to care, to feel, to simply connect with another person without expectation. And now, standing before him, was someone who reminded him of all he had lost along the way. Without a word, he stepped closer to the girl. She looked up at him, her eyes wide with cautious hope. He noticed the dirt on her hands, the scuffs on her shoes, and the faint tremor in her frame caused by the cold. Something inside him softened, a long dormant part of his heart awakening. For the first time in years, he felt the impulse to act not for profit, not for recognition, but purely because it was the right thing to do. He bent slightly to meet her gaze. "Come with me," he said softly. His voice lacked the usual command or authority. Instead, it carried a gentle invitation. The girl's eyes lit up. A smile, small but radiant, spread across her face. It was a smile untouched by cynicism, unshaped by disappointment. It was a smile born of pure hope. She took a careful step forward, and then another until she was walking beside him. The city seemed different now. The lights, the noise, the cold, they all became part of a new experience, one that the man had never truly noticed before. Walking beside the girl, he felt a strange mix of anticipation and nervousness. He wondered how people inside the restaurant would react if they noticed her. He wondered if he could truly make a difference in such a small, yet meaningful way. But these thoughts faded as he focused on the simple act of bringing a child inside to eat, something that should have been ordinary, but now felt extraordinary. As they reached the entrance, the girl's eyes scanned the luxurious interior, marveling at the tables set with white linens, the soft glow of candlelight, and the neatly dressed waiters moving gracefully between guests. She had never seen anything like it before. She looked up at him, a silent question in her eyes, and he simply smiled. The smile was awkward, unfamiliar to him but genuine. He led her inside, carefully navigating between tables filled with diners who were likely too absorbed in their own lives to notice the small miracle unfolding beside them. The moment they sat down, the man realized that this was more than just sharing a meal. It was a turning point, a chance to reconnect with a part of himself that he had long ignored. The girl's eyes sparkled with gratitude, and in that sparkle he found a reflection of the kindness he had forgotten to give, to others and to himself. That night in that quiet corner of a bustling city restaurant, the walls around a millionaire's heart began to crack, gently but irrevocably, all because a small street girl had asked one simple question: "Daddy, can I eat with you?" And in that single moment, life as he knew it began to change. The restaurant smelled warm and inviting. The rich aroma of food, the scent of fresh bread, simmering sauces, and roasted meat filled the air. For the girl who had spent her days on cold streets scavenging for scraps, it was almost overwhelming. She glanced around nervously, noticing the chandeliers, the polished tables, and the neatly dressed people enjoying their dinners. Everything seemed so distant from her reality, yet somehow, walking beside the man, she felt safe. The soft glow of the lights reflected in her wide, curious eyes. The man led her to a small table in the corner, away from prying eyes. He pulled out a chair for her, though she hesitated for a moment, unsure of how to act in such a place. He smiled gently, reassuring her, and she slowly sat down, her small hands clutching the edge of the table. The weight of her bag, though worn and tattered, seemed heavier at that moment, filled not just with her few belongings, but with the countless moments of hunger, fear, and struggle she had endured. He motioned to a waiter, and with careful words, he ordered a simple meal for the girl, something warm, nourishing, and gentle. As he did so, he noticed her eyes following his every movement. She wasn't shy in a way that demanded attention. She was curious, watching someone who moved in a world so different from hers. The contrast was striking. He thought about how much of life he had spent chasing wealth, power, and status, only to find a deep emptiness inside. This small girl with nothing but hope seemed to possess a courage and honesty he had long forgotten. When the food arrived, the girl's face lit up. She looked at the plate before her as if seeing gold. Her hands trembled slightly, not from fear, but from excitement. She had not eaten a proper meal in days, maybe weeks, and yet here she was, sitting in a restaurant, being offered warmth and comfort without having to beg or sneak. She took a small bite slowly, savoring each mouthful. The man watched her, feeling a mix of emotions he could not fully name. As she ate, she spoke softly, almost as if telling a story aloud. "I live on the street," she said, "near the market. I beg sometimes, but mostly I just try to find food that people throw away. My mother, she isn't here anymore, and my father, I don't know where he is. I try to take care of my little brother, but it's hard." Her words were simple, yet the weight behind them was immense. The man listened intently. Her voice, though quiet, carried the pain of a life that no child should have to endure. He felt a strange pull in his chest. Here was a girl who had been abandoned by circumstances beyond her control, and yet she had the courage to face the world each day. He thought about his own childhood, not as privileged, but as a time of struggle that had taught him survival. He remembered the nights when his stomach ached from hunger, the days when he had to work hard just to keep a small roof over his head. And now, years later, he had achieved everything he had once dreamed of, but something essential was missing. Something that this girl, with her innocent bravery, reminded him of. He cleared his throat and spoke softly, trying to find the right words. Do you have anyone who looks after you? Anyone you can trust?" The girl shook her head, her eyes downcast for a moment. "No," she admitted. "Mostly I look after myself, and sometimes I look after my brother. That's all I can do." Her words made him pause. He had spent his life surrounded by people, assistants, colleagues, advisors, but had he ever really cared for anyone in this way? Could he? The meal continued quietly. The girl ate slowly, savoring each bite, occasionally stealing a glance at him. She didn't ask for more than he had offered. She didn't complain about what was missing or demand luxuries she had never known. She simply ate, appreciating the small gift of food, the warmth of a safe place, and the kindness of a stranger who had chosen to care. The man realized something profound. He had thought he understood generosity because of his wealth. He had donated money to charities, helped causes, and even given aid to people in need. But those gestures, though helpful, were distant and impersonal. This moment was different. This was intimacy in its purest form, human connection without conditions, without expectations, without a ledger of benefits. The girl had no idea who he was, yet she trusted him enough to sit with him and share her life, even for a short while. As they ate, he asked her gently about her dreams. "If you could imagine anything," he said, "what would you want your life to be like?" The girl paused, thinking carefully. Her lips curved slightly as she spoke. "I want to go to school," she said quietly. "I want to learn things, read books, and maybe one day I can help other children like me. I want to have a home, a family. I just want to feel safe." Her words struck him deeply. She had so little, yet she imagined so much. Her hope was not just for survival, it was for a life filled with possibilities. He felt a lump in his throat. Here was a child, beaten down by life, dreaming bigger than he had ever dared to as a boy. He remembered his own ambitions, once fueled by necessity, now fulfilled with wealth and comfort, but without the joy of purpose. He realized that while he had money, he had not given himself the gift of meaningful connection. And now, sitting across from this girl, he understood that wealth alone could not fill the emptiness he had carried for years. The girl noticed his quiet mood and looked at him with innocent concern. "Are you sad?" she asked softly. Her voice, gentle and full of curiosity, broke through the barrier he had built around himself. He shook his head, trying to mask the emotions rising inside him. "No, not sad," he replied. "Just thinking. You have a lot of courage for someone so small." She smiled shyly, a flicker of pride in her eyes. For the first time in years, he allowed himself to listen, not just hear, but truly listen. He listened to her stories about the streets, about the people she met, about the nights when the city seemed cruel and unkind. He listened to the laughter she managed to find, even in hardship, and the resilience that kept her moving forward. Every word she spoke chipped away at the armor he had built around his heart. By the time the meal ended, the man knew something had changed within him. The girl had not asked for riches, for attention, or for fame. She had asked for something far simpler and far more profound: recognition, kindness, and a shared moment of humanity. And in granting that, he had received far more than he could have imagined. He had been reminded of the power of compassion, the importance of caring, and the way a single act of kindness could ripple through both their lives. He rose from the table, signaling to the girl that it was time to leave. She followed quietly, clutching his hand briefly, as if afraid to let go. Outside, the city was colder, harsher, and louder than inside, but now it seemed less frightening. For the first time in a long time, the man felt responsibility, not as an obligation but as a genuine desire to protect, nurture, and guide. He realized that wealth without care was empty, but care, even small care, could transform everything. As they walked down the street, the girl chattered softly about little things: the sights she liked, the smells that reminded her of better days, the small hopes she carried despite hardship. He listened, sometimes offering words of encouragement, sometimes just walking quietly beside her. In that quiet companionship, a bond began to form. It was fragile, yes, but real. Something neither of them had expected, yet both recognized immediately. That night, the millionaire went home with a mind full of thoughts he had not considered in years. He thought about his own childhood, about the paths he had taken, and about the walls he had built around his life. He understood that the girl had given him more than she could ever know. She had reminded him of empathy, compassion, and the human heart's capacity to feel. And he knew that tomorrow, and every day after that, he could no longer live the same way. For the girl, the night was equally transformative. She had not only eaten a warm meal but had felt seen, cared for, and valued. She had found a connection with someone who, in another life, might have been untouchable, distant, and cold. Yet here he was, willing to share something as simple and profound as a meal. For her, it was more than food, it was hope. It was proof that there were good people in the world, willing to step outside their comfort to help someone in need. That night, both of them lay awake in their respective places, one in a warm bed, the other on the streets under a thin blanket, but both carrying the memory of a single, shared moment, a moment that would change them forever. The man knew he had found a new purpose, and the girl knew that someone finally saw her as more than just a street child. And so, the evening ended with a quiet understanding. Life had a way of surprising people, of showing them lessons when they least expected it. A simple question from a small street girl had pierced the walls of a millionaire's heart, setting in motion a change that neither could yet fully understand. But both would carry forward, shaping the days to come. The days following that evening felt different for both the man and the girl. The memory of the shared meal stayed in their minds, lingering like a gentle light in the darkness. The millionaire, who had always measured life by business deals, profits, and schedules, began to notice things he had never paid attention to before. The sound of children laughing in the park, the street vendors calling out their daily specials, even the small acts of kindness among strangers, everything seemed brighter, sharper, more alive. He realized how much of life he had been missing, trapped in the routines of wealth and status, always chasing goals that never filled the emptiness inside. For the girl, the memory of that warm meal, the safe space, and the attention she had received was like a small treasure she carried with her. She told her little brother about it, her eyes shining with excitement, her voice full of hope. She described the chandeliers, the polished floors, the soft glow of the lights, and how a stranger had treated her with kindness. It felt like a dream, something almost unreal, but the warmth of that night stayed with her, reminding her that there was goodness in the world, even in a life so harsh and unforgiving. The man thought about her constantly. He couldn't stop imagining the life she lived on the streets, the struggles she faced every day, and the strength it must take for her to survive. He knew that simply offering her a meal once wasn't enough. He wanted to do more. Not for recognition or praise, but because he felt a deep, undeniable pull to help. He thought about the many people he had passed by in his life, the children he had seen begging on street corners, the homeless families he had ignored. He realized that he could no longer turn a blind eye. The girl had awakened something in him, something human and tender that he had almost forgotten existed. A few days later, he sought her out. The girl was surprised to see him again, but her eyes lit up with recognition and cautious hope. He knelt slightly to meet her gaze and smiled, this time more confidently. "I wanted to see how you are," he said softly, "and to make sure you and your brother are safe." The girl's small hand touched his, a silent gesture of trust and gratitude. It was a simple act, yet it spoke volumes. She had found in him not just a benefactor, but someone who truly cared. He began to visit regularly, bringing warm clothes, food, and supplies. He spoke gently with her about her dreams, encouraging her to think about school, books, and a life beyond the streets. Each conversation with him planted a seed of hope that had been buried under years of struggle and neglect. She began to imagine a future she had never dared to dream of before, a future where she could read, learn, play, and grow safely. One day he asked her, "Would you like to go to school?" The question was simple, but it carried the weight of possibility. The girl's eyes widened and her hands trembled with excitement. "Really?" she whispered. "I could go to school," he nodded. "Yes. I will make sure you have everything you need." That day, the girl felt a joy she had never known. She had survived countless hardships, but the thought of learning, of sitting in a classroom with other children, of being treated like someone important, filled her with an overwhelming happiness. The man arranged everything carefully. He found a small school willing to take her in, provided supplies, uniforms, and books. For the first time, the girl held a backpack filled with her own things, not scavenged or borrowed, but hers. She clutched it close as she walked to the school, her heart beating with a mix of excitement and nervousness. He watched from a distance, silently proud, feeling the strange satisfaction of making a real difference in someone's life. Days turned into weeks and the girl began to thrive. She learned quickly, asked questions eagerly, and made friends for the first time. Her laughter, once rare and cautious, began to fill the spaces around her. She spoke often of her dreams, of becoming a teacher, of helping other children like her, of giving back the kindness she had received. The man watched her grow, realizing that the act of helping her was changing him just as much as it was changing her. He had learned patience, humility, and the joy of giving without expecting anything in return. Through their time together, he discovered the girl's intelligence and curiosity. She asked him questions about business, about the world, and about life. She wanted to understand how people lived, how decisions were made, and why some people had so much while others had so little. Her questions were innocent, yet profound. They forced him to reflect, to consider the values he had lived by, and to recognize the responsibility that came with wealth. It was no longer enough to live for himself. He had the means and the ability to make a positive impact, and he could not ignore it. One evening, as they walked home from school together, the girl spoke about her past with more detail than she had before. She told him about nights spent huddled in doorways, about the hunger she and her brother endured, and about the kindness of strangers who sometimes offered a helping hand. The stories were painful, yet she spoke with resilience. She had survived and she had hope. The man listened quietly, holding her hand gently. He realized that her life on the streets had made her stronger, more compassionate, and more courageous than many people he had met in his world of wealth and luxury. He began to involve himself more deeply. He found safe housing for her and her brother, making sure they had a stable place to sleep, eat, and grow. He hired tutors to help her with her studies, doctors to check on their health, and counselors to help with the emotional scars of street life. Every decision he made was guided by the desire to create a secure, nurturing environment for them. For the first time, he felt the joy of responsibility, not the kind measured by profit or reputation, but the kind measured by love, care, and human connection. The girl, too, grew in confidence. She began to dream bigger and share her dreams with the man. She spoke about helping other children who lived as she once had, about opening a school one day, and about ensuring that no child had to endure the suffering she had experienced. Her words were full of determination, and her eyes sparkled with the certainty of hope. The man listened, moved by her vision. He realized that she was not just a child in need of help, she was a future leader, someone with the courage and heart to change the world. Their bond deepened with every shared moment. Meals became a time to talk, laugh, and reflect. Walks became opportunities to explore the city safely, to discover its hidden corners, and to enjoy simple pleasures. The man began to see the world through her eyes, a world filled with wonder, possibility, and the need for compassion. He recognized that he had been missing this perspective for years, focused on success, wealth, and status, while ignoring the human connections that truly mattered. One day, as they sat together after school, the girl asked a simple question. "Why did you help me?" The man paused, searching for an answer. How could he explain that a single question had broken through the walls of his heart? That a simple act of courage and trust from a small child had awakened something he thought he had lost forever. Finally, he said softly, "Because you reminded me what it means to care. And because everyone deserves to be seen, loved, and given a chance." The girl smiled, a bright, radiant smile full of gratitude and trust. In that moment, he understood that helping her was not just about giving, it was about being human. Weeks turned into months and the girl's life continued to change. She excelled in school, made friends, and discovered talents she had never imagined. The man continued to support her, but he also learned from her. She taught him patience, humility, and the power of hope. She reminded him that the smallest acts of kindness could ripple through the world, changing not only the lives of those who received them, but also the hearts of those who gave. Through this journey, the man found a new sense of purpose. He began to extend his help to other children in similar situations, using his resources to create safe spaces, educational opportunities, and supportive communities. He realized that wealth was most meaningful when used to uplift others, when it was guided by compassion, empathy, and understanding. And he understood, finally, that true happiness came not from material success, but from the bonds we form, the lives we touch, and the love we share. The girl, too, began to see the world differently. She had endured hardship, yes, but she had also experienced the transformative power of kindness. She learned that hope could be found even in the darkest circumstances, that dreams were worth pursuing, and that one person's actions could change lives. Together, she and the man forged a partnership of trust, compassion, and shared purpose, a bond that neither of them had expected, but one that would last a lifetime. And so the simple question she had asked that night, "Daddy, can I eat with you?" continued to echo in both their lives. It had sparked a journey of transformation, hope, and love. It had broken through walls, healed wounds, and created a path for a brighter future. That single act of courage from a small street girl had changed not only her life, but also the life of a millionaire, showing them both the true meaning of humanity, kindness, and connection. Time moved forward, but for both the girl and the millionaire, life had changed forever. The small acts of kindness that had begun months ago had blossomed into a bond built on trust, care, and shared purpose. The girl, once wandering the streets with nothing but hope and courage, now had a safe home, an education, and the possibility of a future she had never dared to imagine. The millionaire, who had spent decades chasing wealth and success, had found something far more valuable: connection, purpose, and the joy of giving without expectation. It was a bright morning when the girl first realized how far she had come. She sat at her small desk in the study room the man had arranged for her, flipping through a book filled with colorful pictures and words she was learning to read. Her fingers traced each letter carefully, and her eyes sparkled with excitement. She looked out the window at the streets she once roamed, now distant memories, and smiled. The man stood nearby, watching her quietly, pride and warmth swelling in his chest. He had provided the resources, but it was her determination, her courage, and her resilience that had brought her this far. They had grown close over the months. The girl had begun calling him Daddy, a word that carried more than just affection. It carried trust, recognition, and a deep sense of belonging. For the millionaire, the word had transformed his life. Each time she said it, he was reminded of the responsibility he had taken on and the chance he had been given to make a real difference. Her presence in his life had softened the edges of his heart, replacing loneliness with warmth and compassion. One afternoon, as they walked together to the nearby park, the girl turned to him and asked, "Daddy, can we help other children like me?" Her eyes were wide with hope and determination. He paused, thinking about her question. The answer was obvious, yet profound. "Yes," he said firmly, smiling. "We will help as many as we can." From that day forward, they began planning ways to reach other children living on the streets. They spoke with community leaders, found safe shelters, and organized educational programs. Every step of the way, the girl's insights and experiences guided the decisions. She knew what children needed because she had lived it herself. The man watched in awe as the girl took on challenges with bravery and intelligence. She organized small groups of children for reading sessions, helped them with homework, and encouraged them to dream beyond the limitations of their circumstances. Her energy and passion were contagious. Others joined their efforts: volunteers, educators, and people inspired by their mission. Slowly but surely, the little project they started grew into something larger, reaching more children and creating lasting change. Despite all the work and activity, the man never lost sight of the small moments that had started it all. He remembered the night she had asked to eat with him, the moment that had broken through his walls and awakened his heart. He often reflected on how a single question from a child had transformed his life entirely. He had learned that wealth without compassion was empty, but compassion combined with action could change the world. For the girl, life was a mixture of joy, learning, and growth. She excelled in her studies, made friends, and began to dream even bigger dreams. She spoke about becoming a teacher one day, helping more children like her, and ensuring that no child felt invisible or abandoned. She had learned that her past hardships had given her a unique strength, a strength she now used to inspire and help others. The streets she had once feared no longer defined her. They had shaped her into someone resilient, wise, and compassionate. One evening, as they returned from a day of visiting a local shelter, the girl turned to him and said softly, "Daddy, I never thought life could be this good." The man smiled, feeling a lump in his throat. He knew exactly what she meant. Life had not been easy for either of them, yet together they had transformed struggle into hope, loneliness into connection, and hardship into opportunity. He replied gently, "Life can be good when we choose to care, when we choose to act, and when we remember to be kind." She nodded, absorbing his words, understanding more deeply than most adults ever would. As the years passed, their impact continued to grow. The small shelter they had started expanded, providing not only food and shelter but education, counseling, and medical support. Children who had once lived in fear and uncertainty began to thrive. The man and the girl worked side by side, learning from each other, growing together, and touching countless lives. Each success, each child helped, was a reminder of how far they had come from that one night when she had asked a simple question, "Daddy, can I eat with you?" The millionaire found that his priorities had shifted dramatically. Where he once measured success in dollars and status, he now measured it in lives touched, hearts healed, and hope restored. He spent less time in boardrooms and more time walking the streets, listening to stories, and understanding the needs of those society often ignored. His wealth, once a symbol of personal achievement, had become a tool for change, a way to create lasting impact and provide opportunities to those who needed them most. The girl grew into a confident young woman, carrying the lessons of her past with grace and compassion. She continued her education, eventually studying to become a teacher, determined to dedicate her life to children who had experienced hardship. Her bond with the man deepened, evolving into a relationship built on mutual respect, love, and shared purpose. They were no longer just mentor and child, benefactor and beneficiary. They were family in the truest sense, connected by experiences that had transformed them both. One quiet afternoon, as they sat together overlooking the city, the girl spoke thoughtfully. "Daddy, do you remember the first time I asked you if I could eat with you?" The man nodded, smiling. "I will never forget it," he said softly. "That question changed my life." She leaned against him, feeling safe, loved, and seen. "It changed mine too," she whispered. "And now we're helping so many others. It's like your heart and my hope created something bigger than both of us." The man felt a deep sense of fulfillment. He realized that true wealth was not measured in money, but in the love, compassion, and positive change one could bring into the world. The story of their journey spread quietly at first, through the children they helped and the communities they touched. People began to notice how a millionaire, once distant and focused only on business, had transformed his life by listening to, caring for, and empowering a single child. Others followed his example, inspired by the power of simple acts of kindness. The girl's courage and vision inspired countless others as well, showing that even those who had faced the hardest struggles could rise, dream, and make a difference. Eventually, their efforts became a model for programs supporting vulnerable children. They trained volunteers, collaborated with schools, and built a network of shelters and safe spaces. Children who had been forgotten by society found hope, education, and guidance. And through it all, the girl and the man remained at the center, reminding everyone that compassion, patience, and action could change lives in ways no money alone ever could. In private moments, the man often reflected on the profound lesson he had learned, that life's true purpose lay not in acquiring wealth or power, but in connecting with others, showing kindness, and offering hope. And he knew, without doubt, that none of it would have happened without that one simple question from a small street girl. For the girl, life had become a journey of growth, learning, and giving. She remembered the cold streets she once called home, the hunger she had endured, and the fear that had always followed her. But she also remembered the warmth of a stranger who had seen her as more than just a street child. That warmth had grown into a life filled with love, education, purpose, and the ability to help others. Her past, once a source of pain, had become a foundation for compassion, resilience, and hope. Years later, when they looked back, both the girl and the man understood the true meaning of that night. It had not been merely a meal, it had been the beginning of a transformation. A single question had unlocked hearts, created bonds, and sparked a movement of kindness and hope. They had both learned that the smallest actions could have the greatest impact, that courage and trust could change the course of lives, and that love and compassion were more powerful than any wealth. And so, the story came full circle. A millionaire, once focused solely on success, had discovered the joy of giving, the beauty of human connection, and the fulfillment that comes from helping others. A young girl, once lost and forgotten, had found safety, education, and the opportunity to dream. Together, they had created a legacy, not of wealth, but of hope, love, and transformation. The girl, now confident and thriving, often stood beside the man as they walked through the city. They smiled at the children they met, offered help where it was needed, and shared stories of courage, resilience, and kindness. Every child they helped was a reminder of the power of compassion and the ripple effect of one simple act. And every time the girl looked at him, she remembered the night she had asked a question that changed everything. "Daddy, can I eat with you?" A simple question, asked with innocence and hope, had grown into a story of transformation, love, and human connection. It had broken walls, healed hearts, and created a life filled with meaning for both the girl and the millionaire. And in the end, they both understood the most important truth. Life's greatest treasures are not counted in money, but in the lives we touch, the hope we inspire, and the love we share.